We didn't just pick up a guitar because, you know, it was something that, you know, was going to cost thousands of dollars and be like difficult to, you know.
That's more of like a dentist thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey folks, welcome to IBMA World of Bluegrass 2023. This year, IBMA made me artist in residence, so I assembled a crack team of content creators to help me lead panels, interview famous players, run a guitar contest, and show you what IBMA is all about. Thanks for the opportunity, IBMA. Now let's get on with the video.
I get a lot of comments on YouTube, people ask things, and I don't really want to answer all of them, so I thought maybe I could just ask you some of those questions and you could help them. So recently I posted a little reel about a break you played on Up on the Divide, and I think it's that live video that you guys kind of did to promote the track when it dropped.
Oh,
and I transcribed your break. Right?
Cool.
Breathplay112 says, could you do the guitar riff on Lovin' Babe on the same album?
Oh yeah, you know, there's the... But it might have been talking about this.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. The second one was totally improvised.
It's going to be so much easier to write down with the front row seat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just cross-picking on the... Yeah.
Let's see here. I got a comment from Troy. Troy was asking if he could see our unedited conversation from the Brian Sutton camp. And I told him, hey man, there's not a lot more. We talked like real quick in that dressing room and then kind of got out. And he says, if I was given the opportunity to ask a question, I would ask Chris if he can possibly remember a specific time in his playing when music seemingly clicked for him. A turning point in his progression. Was there something in particular he was practicing? Was it based in an area of study? What was a pivotal moment for him, if any, when he felt like the fretboard opened up for him?
I feel like from the time I was pretty young, before I could play in time, I had like a little bit of a sense of the fretboard, a little bit. Like what I had a hard time with was like learning to have good time. And my dad and brother like have this story that they tell, because I like went with my dad for the weekend. My brother Ben's a really good guitar player, and he's much older than I am, and he doesn't really play that much anymore. He never did it professionally. But apparently when Ben, you know, first started playing guitar, you know, they showed him 3 chords and he came home and he could play the 3 chords, and he and my dad could just play music immediately. So Ben could play music the first day. It took me like a year before I could change chords in time. And I'm not even kidding. This is not like some false modesty like trip. This is like true. But I just loved it. So I loved it more than anybody. When I finally found like my muse on guitar, the thing that actually lit me up first was Eric Johnson, the electric guitar player. For some weird reason, when I was like 9 years old, that was the thing that like, I heard Cliffs of Dover and I heard that record. There were 2 records out at that time, Tones and Avia Musicom. But those 2 records, like, just in my little 9-year-old brain that was always surrounded with music, because my dad and everybody, and my mom too. I mean, my mom, we were listening to Glenn Gould all the time and Oscar Peterson. I mean, it was like the soundtrack of life. It was all this cool music, but that was like my music, and I'd never heard anything. And that was a guy who was like, he was like dedicated, you know, because Eric is like a monk or something like that. He was, especially back then, he was so clear, and something about that really lit me up. So when that happened, you kind of couldn't keep a guitar out of my hand, because there was just something about that I found to be, about that sound that he made, that I found to be really inspiring. But I was no good at it. Eventually, when time clicked was when I started to come back to bluegrass a little bit, where there was like a little bit of this motor, which there wasn't in that other music. So anyway, yeah, I went with my dad for this weekend, and we'd try and play tunes, and I think I was, you know, my dad put up with me. But apparently this one weekend it just kind of snapped in, and I could like play decent rhythm guitar in time. Yeah. And I remember his, you know, and they'll tell this story, it's like, my brother would be like, yeah, Dad was like, called me up and he was like, he got it. He can finally do it. But there was this moment, like where I just started being able to play in time. But as far as like it opening up, to me it's always been about experimentation and curiosity. So it's like, you know, it's like what what can happen on one string? Can you just like give yourself like... It's like that was kind of weird, but sort of musical. Like that could be interesting. And I think for whatever reason, I've just always been open in that way. So you just kind of learn more stuff gradually, but it's that same kind of headspace that has been kind of consistent, maybe.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, we restarted camera.
Are we? Yeah. Should we start recording?
Yeah, should we?
Excessive mess that all up. Can we do that?
I was gonna go to the thing you were just. Yeah. If that was your Mickey, why don't you come up here? We just need to get audio of him asking the question.
Yeah.
Come on up. I love that. Yeah. You just come lean on in.
Curious to ask Chris what it's like playing with people like Julian, Lage, and Chris Thile, who are some of the greatest musicians of all time, really. I
mean, it's great. They're really good. You know, they're not demigods. You know, they're still people. They're just really good at what they do. I find it's a real privilege, and it's something that I'm very grateful for, that people like that, you know, seem happy to play with me, and I try to always just cherish getting to make music with those guys. I don't know, at the same time, you can't really think about that too much, because the second you do, you're not going to make good music. Like, I'll tell you this, you know, Julian is in a way this remarkable guitar player who can do, like, his ability seems more boundless than in certain ways that I really value, but I think a lot of us really value. His thing seems more boundless than anybody else I can think of in certain respects. Now, if you want Julian to play rhythm guitar in this kind of way that we're talking about, and this is no knock on Jules, because he would be the first one to tell you, but I think it's an important point to make. He can't do it. You know, Julian can't like lay down that. He could if he spent some time doing it, but that's not what he does. So it's like Julian is such a wise thinker. Every great musician I know, they're incredible problem solvers. Julian's an unbelievable problem solver, and he thinks about things in a very outside-the-box kind of way. He'll approach a problem, or he'll talk about improvising in a way that nobody else, like there'd just be this whole conversation that he's going to have about it that's going to be different than any conversation you've probably heard than anybody else. And I think that's a lot of the source of his power. So in this way, I put Julian on a pedestal for sure. But there's this, on this other side, like I have never felt like a better guitar player than when I'm playing with Julian, which is pretty cool, you know, to play with somebody like that. And I'm not saying that I'm not trying to do any kind of comparison game there at all. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm saying that like playing with Julian is something that lifts me up. And I feel like that being open to that thing is really wonderful, but if you're thinking about anything other than music, you're not going to be open to that, and you're not going to get lifted, you're just going to get crushed. In retrospect, it's a great privilege, but it's not like, but it's nothing more than that.
I got the mean woman blues, Lord knows I lose. I just can't seem to get her off my mind.
You know, when I do these lessons and I teach, you know, well-known breaks, a lot of times I play along to the recording and I try to match the inflection as perfectly as I can, and that means trying to drag and trying to rush and like trying to change my volume and everything. And sometimes I get it really good, and sometimes I don't get it really good. I think the worst I've ever done is on Julian's break for Any Old Time, off of your duo record. He starts with these real wide, I think they're quarter note triplets, and then he's got all of these funky double stops that I've never seen anyone make choices like that before. Just trying to get all of the attack and all of the, you know, intensity and volume and his feel too, where it sits and everything. It's probably the most difficult one I've ever done, and it's a very mid-tempo break. A lot of people would think it was the speed, but
well,
it's not.
If you solo up, like on the records we've made, like Mount Royal, you know, I don't actually have the multi-tracks of Avalon, because Kenneth Pattengale recorded that, and like he basically did everything. We were just had some input, but Mount Royal, like I edited that, and actually we recorded it twice. We recorded it once and threw it all out. But anyway, if you solo Julian's tracks on there, it's actually interesting because it's all over the deck tempo-wise. And that, again, that's not like a bad. That's like, it's awesome. It's why it's so good. But if it's not relative to, you know like whatever, something like that, it sounds crazy.
Yeah.
But
I know,
then,
I've tried to play along to it.
Yeah. But it's like, you know, I think again, that's kind of goes back to the first thing I was saying about Julian, is that like he thinks about things in so much in his own way. And I've asked him, like, you know, questions about this, like on long car rides and stuff. I was like, what was your thing? Like, what do you make of what it is that you do? And he said, well, when he was from the time he was very young, he didn't want to be better. Like he was wise enough to think that this idea of better is just nonsense, because it is. But he said, I wanted to be different. He said, I wanted to be more unique than anybody else, which I think is really cool, you know?
Yeah.
And he never transcribed anybody's breaks. Like Julian has never done any transcription. But you know, when he was a boy, his dad like showed him a pentatonic scale and was like, you can play this scale. Look, I'll play this chord and you can play any of these notes.
Yeah.
I think he kind of has always had that permission that like, okay, you can just kind of do it your way and it's going to be cool. And then when he started working on it more and more, it was just like, you know, I don't want to speak for him, but I think like the idea was being unique was like the most interesting thing that he could be. If you kind of live your whole musical life that way, and you have the luxury, you know, the nice thing that Julian and Thile had is they didn't go to school. They were homeschooled, you know, they were from the time they were 5 years old, they were like practicing like hours a day, not because their parents made them, but because they were just kind of, they happened to be driven in this way as children, but they still like, you know, they got there the same way everybody else did. They just had a head start.
One of the things I want to ask you is if there was like sort of like the biggest, you know, like fail of your career, right? These like crushing moments on stage where things just don't go the way you expect. We've been asking everyone this and we've gotten some very funny answers. And I have a feeling I know what story you're going to tell, but I still want you to tell it for us.
Oh, I've got a good one. Yeah, so definitely my most epic fail was trying to play Round Midnight by Joe Pass's version of Round Midnight on Live from Here. And that show was crazy because, like, you know, we'd figure out what we were playing. You know, Thile would send an email often it was on Wednesday, maybe Tuesday, and it'd be like, and you know, we'd fly to New York Friday morning. It's like, we're gonna do this, this, and this. That week, he called me on Monday and he was like, hey, it's Joe Pass's birthday. Would you be up for like learning some kind of Joe Pass thing? And I was like, sure, okay, I'll try it.
He gave you one extra day.
Yeah. So it was like, it's Monday afternoon, and I was like, yeah, okay. And he was like, well, go listen around, see what would be fun. So I put on Virtuoso, because that's, you know, great record, and I was listening to it, and Round Midnight kind of spoke to me. So I was like, okay, I'll try Round Midnight. He's like, great. I started working on it, and usually, I mean, usually I would slack pretty hard on that show. Like maybe Thursday night around like 7 p.m. I'd start working on the music, unless we had something crazy, like, you know, maybe if there's like some specific guitar thing, you know, that was not in your wheelhouse, like, you know, I might try and get a jump on that. But this was different. So like, as soon as I picked the song, it was like, all right, I got my work cut out for me. So I started shedding it, and I practiced. I mean, I was probably practicing like 8-9 hours a day, like, you know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, just shedding this thing because I'm just, you know, whatever. That's not my bag, you know. Yeah. I'm not fluent in that language, but I kind of had this sense of like, well, I can do anything I put my mind to. but I got to work.
Yeah.
But see, what I just said, that whole thing, I can do anything. See, it's a little dangerous. I had a little ego in there.
Yeah.
And it wound up being my undoing. Yeah, the show rolled around, and I got it down. I learned it, and I could actually by Friday night, I could really legitimately play it very well. Like I had it down to where it was like impressive, and I could nail it. And I even called Julian, because I was like, all right, Julian, this is a literal conversation. I called him up, and I was like, all right, I just want you to hear that I can do this for when I bomb it on the radio tomorrow. And kind of joking, but it just shows you where my head was, because I was in this.
That's cocky.
Well, no, it actually, well, it was cocky, but it was like, but it wasn't cocky, because I was also afraid of it. I was definitely afraid of it. To make a long story short, the radio show came on, and we did this musician's birthday segment, and Thile's like, okay, we're gonna do, it's Joe Pass's birthday, like, Chris Eldridge is gonna try and do Joe's version of Round Midnight, Break a Leg. And I just totally froze. I made it like maybe 30 seconds. This is about a 2-minute excerpt. Made it about 30 seconds in and got to this part. It was tricky. It was like the trickiest part, but I missed it, and then I couldn't get back on, because this is like somebody who gets like a Steve Kaufman book and learns everything from tablature.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, as soon as I got off the tab, I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I did it. I didn't learn it from tab, but I still I got off, and this is on the radio, and like I've never been able to. It's never been a situation where I like mess up and I can't get back on. But on this, I couldn't do it, and it was just me, and you're playing on the radio for literally, that show had an audience of about 3 million people, like. There's also a room of 2,000 people sitting in front of you, and I just froze, and I was like, so I said, well, I done lost it, as if like saying it like that, people would just think, well, he's a dumb hillbilly. We'll cut him some slack, and yeah, I really biffed it really hard. I just totally froze. It was live on the radio, and at the end of the show, I was like, you guys got to let me do a mulligan in the encore. And I played it, and that's what the video that you've seen, that was the mulligan in the encore, which I still didn't nail. I actually could play it, I think, considerably better than that, but it was pretty good. Anyway, that night, I was like, I was so miserable. I was crushed. It was literally like somebody in my immediate family had died. I mean, I was like really upset, and I was just sulking around all night. Actually, interestingly, Mandolin Orange was on the show that night, before they became Watch House. And Andrew and I picked for a while. Andrew helped raise my spirits backstage there, and we picked, and that was very nice of him. Finally, like, everybody went to this tiki bar afterwards in Kansas City. It was cool. I was just sitting in the corner, like, sad and whatever, because I just bombed it so hard. And eventually, we got back to the hotel. It was like 3 a.m., and I just realized, I was like, man, this sucks. I don't want to feel so bad. Like, why do I feel so bad? This is crazy. Yeah. When I get home, like, my dog is going to just jump all over me as soon as I walk through the door. My girlfriend, now wife, will like be happy to see me. I could call my mom. She's going to be psyched, to get a phone call. And I just realized that I had put so much, I'd staked so much value in myself in doing this performance, that as soon as I realized that it could go wrong, and then that would mean that I had no value, that I was like worthless,
Which is not true.
Which of course is not true.
You get in it, you convince yourself that.
But you feel that, and that same thing. Yeah, it's crazy to say it like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, of course we all know, like, that's crazy. That's not actually true. But I certainly felt it, and I'm sure we can all relate to having a moment like that. And this was just on a massive scale. I mean, it was like literally actually millions of people listening, and it was really cool, because I'm actually really grateful that happened, because after it happened, I kind of had to do the like post-mortem, like do like the post-game on it, and like realize, like, why did that happen, and why did I get so upset? And I realized the reason, and even that made me, those answers kind of led me to, well, why did I work so hard on this thing? Because I worked harder on that than I'd worked on anything probably since, that was probably my heaviest week of practicing since, like, we started working on Blind Leaving the Blind in Punch Brothers back in the day. I mean, I worked hard. Yeah. And it was because I had something I wanted to prove, because I'm like, I just stand in the shadows and people don't think much of me as a player, but like, I'm this guy who can do a lot of stuff if I put my mind to it. And so I was coming from this ego-y place, and as soon as I realized, like, oh, that happened because I was coming from this ego-y place, and as soon as I put myself in that spot, I did have a lot to lose.
Yeah.
It also gave me fuel. So it's like it's a good question, because it's like, well, how can you have a healthy relationship to the stuff you're doing?
Right.
How can you have it come from come from a place of curiosity and interest and love rather than like ego? Because then you become really vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even sound that great.
Do you kind of want, the fuel, or do you want to just kind of be invincible? You don't have that something to lose, right? How do you?
Well, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think there's a different kind of fuel. I think there's a fuel that's born of curiosity and that kind of like mystical, cool, transcendent thing that got us all into music in the first place. Like before any of us picked up a guitar to become flatpickers or do anything, like there was a reason that we liked the sound of music. We didn't just pick up a guitar because it was something that was going to cost thousands of dollars and be like difficult to,
That's more of like a dentist thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but even the dentist though, listened to something that like transported them. They heard Doc Watson and they were like, geez, that is amazing. Yeah. Like that's incredible. And so like we've all had this transcendent experience. It's like how much you follow through on it if you've got your dental practice is like, yeah, we'll see. But we all have that experience. And so I think staying connected to that and kind of remembering that that's where it's at.
Yeah.